Good morning to the brave and the bold. Thank you for being here. I know it's really, really cold outside. Anybody remember what the significance of January 12th is? What an honest answer. Thank you, Garrett. I'll talk to you, Garrett. You know what January 12th is? It's National Quitters Day. Yeah. In fact, I read a stat the other day that said 80% of Americans have already given up on their New Year's resolutions by the second week of January, so they designate it as National Quitters Day, recognizing people will quit going to the gym, they'll quit going to other things that they probably promised to do, thought they might do in the coming year. It's also an opportunity to sort of encourage people is don't quit. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep trying to be a better person, to build a better community, to build a better kingdom, to build a better church. So I'll offer that to you as well. I also want to reiterate what Benny said about coffee and conversations. Something new that I would really love for you to be a part of. Just really, that's what it is. It's a conversation about where we are, where we're going, how we're going to get there, but also to invite you to share what you have in terms of your own hopes and dreams and prayers for the congregation. I've said this for so long, it's probably sounding redundant, but we're just at a really important phase of this church and how we're moving forward with God's leadership and God's guidance and how we can all be a part of it, I think is essential. Best way I know to do that is sit down, have a cup of coffee, talk about it, and begin to plan and dream about what God has in store for us. God's really at work in this church, and I want you not only to be aware of it, I want more importantly for you to be a part of it. So if this is something that you probably in the past have never signed up for, please sign up for it. You can do that and call the church office or look at the epistle. There's all kinds of scan codes. Multiple times we've designated. If you've been with me long enough, you know about an hour is all I can do. So it's not going to drag on for 2 or 3 hours. It's going to be a really good, I think, in-depth, helpful conversation. I not only invite you, really want and need you to be a part of that if you can possibly do that as well. We continue our series on FOMO, the fear of missing out, because there's a lot of fears that are embedded not only in our lives. The gospel and the Bible in its entirety addresses it, talks about it. You've just seen a passage from Isaiah. It's one that Jesus knew in particular because Jesus understood passages and how important they were to his own spiritual formation and guidance as well. So as we look at it, let's do what we always do and what we do best. Let's turn to God. Gracious God, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. It's been called the loneliest road in America. It's in Nevada. It's about a 300-mile stretch of road. In fact, they're warning people that once you embark on this journey, be careful. You better have a full tank of gas. You better have provisions because there's only a couple of gas stations, a couple of little sparse towns, but really nothing but desert. It's designated as the loneliest road in America. In fact, AAA says we warn all motorists not to drive there unless they're confident of their survival skills. If that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what does. Some of you may have heard about the loneliest road. Some of you actually may have traveled on the loneliest road. If you haven't, you still know what it's like to be on a road that's lonely. Jesus understood and traveled a lonely path, and I think he has something important for us to know and share. Because I don't think I'm overstating the case. There's an epidemic of loneliness in our country. And whether it's triggered or accelerated by COVID or by technology, social media, whatever you want to say it, I think it's just universally recognized that the more connected we are technologically, the more disconnected we feel at times. And I'm not just talking about being alone. There are a lot of people who really welcome and need the moment of being alone. I mean, it's being alone and feeling lonely. You can do that even if you're in isolation, but you can also be lonely in a crowd of people when you don't feel like you belong anywhere. The detrimental aspects of being loneliness are well documented. There's a physical toll that it takes on your place, and we talk about it risking your life or what it does to you mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. It's just really profound. It's equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. When medical people look at loneliness, they identify it as one of the leading causes like obesity and high blood pressure and depression and suicide and mental health issues that are associated with it as well. There's actually a medical term called a broken heart. And if you don't believe it, I've seen it firsthand. A dear couple I knew that were together for almost 70 years, she passed away He was so grief-stricken, I don't know how to medically explain it, but in 2 months he passed. He could not imagine living in a world without his beloved wife. There's a sense of our heart is connected to us deeply. And when we're alone, it feels like we're isolated, abandoned. And every single one of us understands that. It's been called the leprosy of the 21st century. And something is wrong in the culture that we live in. No matter what kind of sort of whitewash we want to put on it, there's something intrinsically wrong. It's not what God intended. Go back to Genesis. The God that created this world envisioned a world, and something goes wrong. You read in the first chapters, and it seems like everything is going along just great. Day one, he creates. What does he do? He steps back and says, it is good. By the sixth day of creation, every single day followed by the comment, it is good. By the sixth day, he steps back, and what does he say? It is very good. But then something in chapter 2 of Genesis tells you that something's not quite right. It's the first time that God acknowledges something is wrong. And what does he say? It's not good for man to be alone. I'll make a helper suitable for him. So loneliness is the first thing that God ever sees in creation that he declares, this is not right, it's wrong. I don't know that you can name an issue in your own personal life or in our culture that doesn't go all the way back to being alone or isolated or abandoned. Whatever we have in terms of challenges, whatever the hatred, the violence, whatever the disconnect, whatever the tribal influences that separate us, whatever prejudice, all those things stem from feeling alone. And there's this difference between being alone and feeling alone. It's when we feel disconnected, and the key to it is to be connected. And I don't know how long it takes you, but it takes a lot of us a long time to figure out we just need people. There's a Lone Ranger syndrome that's very real, the people who try to do everything on their own. They don't need any help. They feel like they're an island. They don't want anybody. They take credit for everything. They're self-made people, and they live with this mythology that they don't need anybody. And then you look at the Bible and you begin to realize a lot of Lone Rangers who wake up to the hard realization, I can't do this by myself. Moses, who's trying to lead this unhappy people through the wilderness. What does he call them? They're a stiff-necked people. God, I can't do a thing with them. And Jethro, the father-in-law, is the one who says, Moses, you're trying to do everything by yourself. You need help. Take 70 people, disperse, delegate, let them raise up a new group of leaders. Let them be a part of what I'm doing. Don't take it all upon yourself. Over and over again, realize Paul doesn't travel alone. It's Barnabas, Silas, Luke, everybody that he goes, he needs Timothy. He needs other people for him to do the work that he's called to do. Jesus, the first act of his own ministry is to call 12 disciples. Yeah, they needed him, but he also needed them. He expands it to 70, 120. They begin to grow, and that's how it begins to flourish. And by the time the crucifixion and the resurrection happens, people are dispersed into all parts of the world who now become a part of the work of the kingdom. The first words of the Lord's Prayer, and I think this is incredible, it isn't my Father, it's our Father. And we just gloss over that like it doesn't mean anything. And it says from the very beginning, our first prayer, the prayer that he teaches us to pray is not my Father in heaven, our Father, meaning we're all in this together. So when it comes to conquering isolation and loneliness, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. You and I need people. And we don't need 3,000 friends. We do need a group of friends. Some of us really rely on about 5 to 10, 12 friends. That if something happened, that we could call them and be honest with them, that we knew they would come if we needed them and they sense we need help. And it's this idea that if you have this connection, every longevity study I've ever read never discounts faith, diet, but also being connected to each other. And it literally is a physical risk to try to go at it alone or to be pessimistic, because it leads to all kinds of different terrible things. But if you live a life that is connected and you have a deep and profound faith, you're actually going to live longer, you're going to live healthier, you're going to live better. There's less evidence of people who are actively involved in church on a consistent basis, who are serving other people. Less evidence of cardiovascular disease, less evidence of depression, dementia, all the things that you just begin to check off. And it's clinically proven that that helps you in terms of living a complete and abundant and good life. That compared to those who never go to church, more than once a week is associated with 33% lower risk for death for any cause. So if you come to church once a week, you've already reduced your mortality by 33%. Attending once a week with a 26% lower risk and going less than once a week, a 13% lower risk. The less you come, the more and greater the risk is. The risk for mortality for cardiovascular disease and cancer follows a similar pattern. And here's a stunning statistic, and I'll point you to the references, that if you're actively involved in church, you are serving your community, you have a deep sense of faith, you can add 7 to 9 years of your life, which I think is the greatest brochure we could ever print out. It's not, hey, we got some great programs. Hey, come to church. You get to live about 7 to 9 years longer and to be healthier. And if that's true, 7 to 9 years, people like Vicki Smith are going to live to be about 120 years old, if I see it right. Part of this is just to be connected in a deeper way. So what does it say to us? It says we need Jesus because Jesus knows what it's like to be alone, what it's like to feel abandoned. It's the level of loneliness he goes out of his way to address. He takes people who feel unlovable. He breaks down walls that separate and isolate people. He takes people who they're their own worst enemy. Does that sound familiar to any of us? And helps them understand how sacred and beloved they are to God. Because he knows what loneliness feels. Jesus often goes to a lonely place. He dies a lonely death on a cross. He's born in a place where there is no room in the world and cannot find a home and only can find a temporary shelter. There's not a moment in his life, but he's always connected to God. And he's always trying to help people understand the connection they have with God as well. He goes out of his way to find the least, the last, and the lost. For people who have closed themselves off, or people who feel like they have sinned too greatly, that there's too many regrets, there's too many things that have happened in the past, they can't overcome it. Jesus is the one who goes out of his way to say, you're not alone. Because he knows when you drill down to the very core of the problems we face in this world, it's a feeling that nobody cares, we're on our own, and nobody's coming to help us, and we should not expect anything less or more. You remember the Samaritan story, the woman at Samaritan at the well? Samaritan woman, it's clear in this Bible, has just made a mess out of her life. She comes in the middle of the day just to avoid anybody. She wants to be alone because when she's with other people, they all look at her like she is untouchable and unclean. She's been married 5 times. She's now living with a 6th. That's what we know what it means in this whole community. How do you even survive that? You're not worthy of anything. And Jesus encounters her, and he begins to talk to her. And she's shocked that he knows everything about her, but maybe he's just been talking to other people. But it's different when he has a conversation with her because he's not talking about what he's heard from other people. He's trying to tell her what God sees and what she's no longer able to see because she thinks she is worthless and unlovable. And Jesus uses this word that if you don't know the original translation, is stunning. He's talking to a woman who's married 5 times, living with another man who's not her husband, has the worst reputation, so much to the degree she cannot even be associated with people, and goes to the well by herself because she wants to avoid all the shame and all the pain that they bring. What does he call her? Kalas. You know what that word means? It means you're perfect. Who on earth would ever call this woman perfect? And that's the point. Nobody on earth does, but Jesus does. And what he's trying to do is remind her, you've allowed other people to tell you who you are. You've made so many mistakes. Now you're convinced what they've told you is true, that you're unlovable. I want to tell you that you're perfect. For a woman to hear someone, a man in particular, tell her, you're perfect, absolutely brings her to her knees. And it changes her life. Because what Jesus does for us is very personal. It's not abstract. It's not a teaching. It's a message to us. When we feel alone, we feel abandoned, we feel isolated, we feel like nobody cares. He's the one who comes to us to say, you have no idea and you cannot fathom how much you are loved. Because the good news is Jesus knows what it is to be lonely. He's felt the pain of rejection, isolation. Even his closest people that he has loved betray him, abandon him, walk away from him in his time of need. And he hears these words because he knows these words and he lives these words. I took you from the ends of the earth, from its farthest corners. I called you. I said, you are my servant. I have chosen you and have not rejected you. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. To know that we're not alone. Tom Long tells this wonderful story. He had a speaking engagement, checked into his hotel, got into the elevator, and there was a handwritten sign on the wall of the elevator, and it said, tonight, room 210, party, everyone invited. And he thought, well, that's kind of strange. And everybody got up on the elevator and came down and saw the same sign, and he started thinking about it. So there's a party in room 210 at 8 o'clock tonight, and everybody's invited, and he begins to think about who might show up. And then next time he gets on the elevator, there's management that corrected it. It was all a hoax. Somebody just put that as a joke. He said he was disappointed because he kept thinking about this party in room 210 and who might come, and it might be a couple of sales reps who were there for a convention that would show up in room 210 just to see what would happen. Maybe a couple of teenage kids who could sneak out from their parents' room because they heard there was a party going on and they didn't want to miss it. Or maybe a couple of weary travelers who'd been on the road and they didn't expect to be there, but because of other things, they just had to check in for that night, and maybe they would show up because who knows what's going to happen. And he thought to himself, it'd be nice just to go to a party and realize it doesn't matter who you are, where you came from, what's ever happened in your life. You're just invited to the party, and it's not really a question of what got you in the door. It's a better conversation about what happens after you get in the door. I want to believe in my deepest thought, it's the kind of church that Jesus talked about. It's the kind of party that Jesus threw. I think it's the kind of party that the church ought to throw, meaning anybody and everybody who's in the need of the grace of God come. There's no litmus test. If you're a sinner in need of God's grace, come. If you're lost on a lonely place, come. If you are empty and bereft, come. Because there's something waiting for you, and every single one of us are invited. You and I both know there's a world of hurt outside this place. Some of you would say there's a world of hurt inside of you. And here's what I want to hear, what I want to say to you. There's good news. You're not alone, even though it feels like it sometimes. So all I can say to you is the next time you ever feel alone and isolated, here's what Jesus would say. Go and find somebody to love. Go and find somebody to serve. Go do something good for someone else. Go and give your heart away. Go and give yourself away. And when you do, what he says is the loneliness will go away.